Okay, let's kick things off. Today we're diving into, well, one of the absolute biggest questions out there.
Yeah.
Where did everything, the universe, life itself, actually come from?
It's huge, yeah. And we're looking at it through a specific lens today. The main article from Awaken magazine, the November-December 2021 issue.
That's the one. It's titled, Should You Believe in a Creator? You
Yeah.
Decide. Catchy title.
It is. And the article, well, it lays out its plan pretty clearly. It says it'll present evidence, facts, and it asks you to examine them.
Right. And then to reach your own conclusion, was it all just, a mindless process, or was there a creator involved?
And it sets up that core tension immediately. It contrasts Stephen Hawking and Leonard Malone now saying the universe can basically create itself from nothing.
Mm-hmm.
With the very first verse of the Bible, Genesis 1:1, God created the heavens and the earth. Two starkly different starting points.
So our goal here isn't to push one answer, but to really unpack the points this specific source raises to help you think it through.
Exactly. The magazine frames it simply. Spontaneous origin or creation. It even mentions how, maybe in school you hear the spontaneous view presented quite confidently.
Yeah.
But it asks, do they offer proof that a creator doesn't exist? And on the flip side, maybe religious leaders preach creation.
But do they give evidence or just ask for faith? That's the question the source poses.
Right. It positions itself as providing the facts, the evidence for you to look at.
Which is why we're digging into it.
Okay.
So where does the article start? It points us outwards first, doesn't it? To the universe.
It does. It asks, what can the universe itself tell us? And one of the first things it highlights is organization.
Organization. How so?
Well, when astronomers map out galaxies, they aren't just scattered randomly like dust bunnies under the bed.
Okay.
No. They form this amazing, huge structure. The article mentions Astronomy magazine calling it a web-like pattern.
Oh, web. Okay.
And it brings up the idea that scientists think invisible dark matter might be acting like unseen scaffolding holding this pattern together.
Unseen scaffolding. That's a powerful image. What's the point the source is making with that?
It's suggesting this deep order seems unlikely to arise from pure chaos. It includes a quote from astronomer Alan Sandage.
Oh, I know that name. Respected figure.
Very. And the source quotes him saying something like, I find it quite improbable that such order came out of chaos. There has to be some organizing principle. For Sandage, that order pointed towards something more.
Interesting. So from the grand scale, does it zoom in?
It does. The next point is about fine-tuning. This is the idea that the fundamental constants and forces of the universe seem, well, incredibly precisely set for life to exist.
Okay, give me an example the article uses.
It talks about the weak nuclear force. This is one of the basic forces governing how particles interact. It's crucial for the fusion reactions inside our sun.
Right, the sun burning steadily.
Exactly. And the article's point is, this force is dialed in perfectly. If it were just a tiny bit weaker, stars like our sun wouldn't have ignited properly. If it were a tiny bit stronger, they would have brained out way too fast. Either way, no stable energy source for life like ours.
Wow, so it has to be just right.
Precisely. And it quotes science writer Anil Ananthaswamy saying that if even one of these kinds of fundamental features were different,
Yeah.
then stars, planets, galaxies, none of it would have formed. And life. Pretty much impossible. It paints a picture of a universe balanced on a knife edge.
That's quite a thought. Then the article brings it even closer to home, right? To Earth itself.
Yes. It presents Earth as, well, an ideal home. It mentions the obvious things, the right atmosphere, all that liquid water.
Crucial stuff.
Absolutely. And also our moon, which is unusually large for a planet our size. That size helps stabilize Earth's tilt, giving us relatively stable seasons and climate over long timescales.
I hadn't thought much about the moon's role in stability.
It's a big factor. The source quotes National Geographic calling Earth the only one in reach that's just right for humans.
But it adds a caveat there.
It does. It's careful to note that National Geographic wasn't endorsing creation with that quote, just commenting on Earth's suitability for us.
Got it. What else about Earth? There's something about our location.
Yeah, our cosmic address. It points out our solar system is kind of in the middle of nowhere within the Milky Way galaxy.
Not exactly bustling downtown galactic center.
No, we're in what's sometimes called the galactic habitable zone. This quiet spot protects us.
Protects us from what?
Intense radiation, mostly. Closer to the galactic center or within the spiral arms, there's a lot more radiation, supernovae, gravitational disruption, stuff that would likely make complex life impossible. So our location seems uniquely safe.
So putting it all together, the cosmic web, the fine-tuning, our perfect planet in its quiet neighborhood.
The source then includes a quote from physicist Paul Davies. He's quoted saying that even though he doesn't teach God created the universe, he feels his existence isn't just a mere quirk of fate, an accident.
He feels like we're meant to be here. That's a strong statement from a physicist.
It suggests that sense of wonder, maybe even purpose, that these observations can evoke regardless of one's ultimate beliefs.
And there's a little consider this box too, right? About predictions.
Yeah, a simple one. Newspapers predict sunrise and sunset times based on known astronomical laws. The source asks, if someone had to figure out and write down those predictions, who figured out and wrote the underlying laws they're based on?
Makes you think. So the upshot of this whole section, according to the source,
It's that these observations, order, fine-tuning, Earth's specialness have convinced many people that there must be a creator. It puts the question to you, could the universe seem designed for life because it was designed?
a direct question. Okay, so from the vastness of space, the article then shifts focus
Yeah,
inward to life itself.
exactly. What does life tell us? The main idea here is that life, even the simplest forms, looks incredibly designed.
How does it illustrate that?
It starts with a cell, describes it as a tiny factory but an unbelievably complex one. It's not just a blob, it's performing thousands of precise chemical reactions and tasks all the time.
And it zooms in on baker's yeast. Seems like an odd choice.
Maybe, but it makes the point effectively. Even this single-celled fungus, something we use for bread, is presented as incredibly complex.
In what way?
It has a nucleus holding its DNA, the blueprint. It has specialized microscopic machines inside that molecules transport them, modify them. It's like a miniature city.
Little machines.
And it even details the sophisticated process yeast uses to go dormant when conditions are bad, like when there's no food, and then reactivate perfectly when things improve.
That dormancy thing is pretty clever for yeast.
It really is. And the source quotes a professor, Ross King, who works with yeast. He says biologists, after all this time, still have a long way to go to fully understand even yeast. It's that complex.
Okay, so yeast is complex. How does the article use this? The robot analogy.
Right. It talks about this robot called Atom, built by scientists specifically to help study yeast. Atom is complex arms, sensors, computers, the works, clearly designed and built. Then the source asks you. You wouldn't look at Atom the robot and think it just popped into existence by itself, right? You know, it had designers, builders.
Of course not.
So the analogy is, if you accept that about the robot Atom, why would you assume the yeast cell, which, while maybe simpler than Atom in some ways, is vastly more complex in its self-replication and biological functions, appeared without a designer?
That parallel definitely pushes you to consider the implications of complexity. What other arguments does it make about life?
A really fundamental one. Life seems to come only from pre-existing life. Omne vivum ex vivo, as the old saying goes.
How does it connect that to origins?
It talks about DNA, explains it's like a long instruction manual written in a 4-letter chemical alphabet, the nucleotides. But for DNA to actually do anything, those letters have to be in an incredibly precise sequence.
Like words in a sentence have to be in the right order to make sense.
Exactly. Random letters don't make a meaningful book. And the source gives the staggering number.
Oh yeah, the probability thing.
It calculates the chance of even a fairly simple functional strand of nucleotides forming randomly as 1 in 10 to the power of 150. That's a 1 with 150 zeros after it.
Which is basically impossible odds.
The article calls it a virtual impossibility. And it stresses that, look, despite decades of trying, science hasn't experimentally shown life arising spontaneously from non-living chemicals.
So complexity points to design, and the origin of life itself seemed to require, well, life. Does it talk about humans specifically?
It does. It highlights qualities that seem unique or highly developed in us. Our creativity, art, music, invention, our complex social structures and deep emotions.
Our appreciation for beauty, planning for the future.
Right. Our ability to enjoy a sunset or taste food, plan decades ahead, and crucially, our search for meaning and purpose in life. Things that don't seem strictly necessary for just basic survival.
And the question it poses based on that.
It asks you to consider, did these qualities evolve only for survival advantage? Or could they be evidence that human life is something more, perhaps a deliberate gift from a creator who values these things?
So this section really focuses on the intricacy of life, from cells to human consciousness, presenting it as evidence that points strongly towards design and therefore a designer.
That's the core argument. And it leads logically to the next section,
Right.
what the source says science can't tell us about origins.
Where does it draw the line for science?
Well, the article puts it very plainly. Science, it says, hasn't actually established how the universe began or how life began. Full stop.
Strong claim. Does it back that up?
It offers quotes. For the universe's origin, it cites Marcelo Gleiser, an agnostic professor, saying cosmology hasn't explained it at all.
Okay. And for life's origin?
It quotes Science News magazine. They apparently stated it may be impossible to nail down how life truly began, because the early geological evidence from Earth is just gone erased by time and geology.
So science can explain how things work now, and maybe evolution, but not the ultimate bang or the first spark of life. That's the source's point.
Essentially, yes. It suggests science hits a wall when it comes to the very beginning. And that, the article argues, leaves open some really big questions that science isn't really designed to answer.
Like what kind of questions?
The deep existential ones. If there was a designer, who are they? Why is there so much pain and suffering? Why so many different religions all claiming truth? Why do people who say they believe in God sometimes do awful things?
Yeah, those aren't really lab coat questions, are they?
Not typically. And this is where the source makes a direct pivot. It says, while science might not have answers for these, the Bible does, or at least it claims to.
And it gives examples of people who found that convincing.
It briefly mentions a couple of individuals, a chemist, Georgi Coyden, who apparently looked at the sheer chemical complexity in cells and thought, this needs a great chemist, a creator. He also found the Bible's advice practical.
And an embryologist?
Yander Su. He saw the incredibly precise process of an embryo developing and felt it pointed to an intelligent designer. And he apparently felt Psalm 139 in the Bible, which talks about being formed in the womb, matched modern embryology in a way that suggested divine knowledge.
So these are presented as examples of science and the Bible complementing each other for these individuals.
That's how the source frames them, yes. As personal accounts where scientific observation led toward a creator, and the Bible provided further answers.
Okay, so we've covered the universe, life, the limits of science. Now, what about the Bible's own account of creation, according to this source? Does it claim it holds up scientifically?
It makes a pretty bold claim, actually. It argues that the Genesis account, specifically chapters 1 and the start of 2, gives a narrative that lines up surprisingly well with scientific findings.
Really? How does it break that down? What are the specific points of harmony it sees?
Okay, first, the very beginning, Genesis 1.1. In the beginning. The article points out that while science once leaned towards an eternal universe, the standard model now is that the universe did have a beginning. So, point 1. Agreement on a starting point.
What's next? The early Earth.
Genesis describes the initial Earth as formless and desolate, covered in water. The source matches this with scientific views of early Earth, quoting a biologist on an unbreathable atmosphere, and Astronomy magazine on it being a water world with almost no land. So that general picture aligns.
Okay, water world, bad atmosphere. What about light in the sky?
This is interesting. Genesis implies light reached the surface early on, but the actual source of the light sun, moon, stars, wasn't clearly visible from the surface until later.
How does that connect to science?
The article cites the Smithsonian Environmental Research Center describing early Earth having a thick methane haze. Light could get through diffusely, but you wouldn't see the sun clearly. Only later, as the atmosphere cleared over vast ages, would the sky look blue and the sun and stars become distinct points of light.
So a progression from hazy light to clear visibility. That's a specific match, the source highlights.
It is. And then there's the order of life appearing.
What does Genesis say?
It lists sea creatures and flying creatures first, then land animals, and finally humans.
In the scientific timeline?
Broadly agrees. Scientists generally place the origin of fish long before mammals, and humans appearing relatively recently. The article quotes physicist Gerald Schroeder calling the match in sequence and timing between Genesis and science phenomenal, especially given how concise Genesis is.
So those are the harmonies it presents.
Yeah.
But people often have issues with Genesis, right? Like the age of the earth, the 6 days. Does the article address those?
Yes, it tackles common misunderstandings head on. It explicitly states what the Bible doesn't say, according to their interpretation.
Okay, like what?
First, it does not say the earth or universe is only 6,000 years old. Genesis 1.1 just says, in the beginning, it doesn't put a date on it. That beginning could have been billions of years ago.
What about the 6 days of creation? That's a big one.
The source argues those are not literal 24-hour days. It explains the Hebrew word for day, yom, Can mean various lengths of time, not just 24 hours. And crucially, Genesis 2.4 refers to the entire creation period, all 6 days, collectively as the day God made earth and heaven. That strongly suggests the days are epochs or long ages.
Okay, so days equals long periods. What about evolution? Does Genesis rule out any change in living things? The kinds thing.
According to the article, no. It says the term kinds in Genesis isn't a precise scientific classification like species. It's a broader term. So within those original broad kinds, the source suggests significant variation, adaptation, even speciation could occur over time. It doesn't forbid change, just implies limits based on the original created kinds.
So it allows for change within kinds, but not necessarily one kind turning into a totally different kind.
That seems to be the distinction the source makes, yes. And it contrasts this Genesis account with other ancient stories.
Ah, the myths comparison.
Right. It invites you to read Genesis, then look at snippets of Babylonian or Egyptian myths, gods fighting, worlds made from carcasses or tears. Fantastical stuff. It asks, does Genesis sound like that, or does it read differently, maybe more plausibly?
And it brings in the Encyclopedia Britannica.
Yeah, quoting it, saying that the idea of life originating via a supernatural event isn't actually inconsistent with current scientific knowledge in its most general form. Again, adding the note that Britannica isn't endorsing creation, just stating a lack of direct contradiction on that general point.
So the argument here is that Genesis, understood this way, fits the scientific picture surprisingly well, avoids mythological fantasy, and thus might be a reliable account from the creator it identifies.
That's the essence of it, which leads directly to the final section. Why does deciding on this even matter?
Right, the so what question. How does the article answer that?
It suggests that if the evidence convinces you there is a creator, the next logical step might be to investigate whether he has communicated with us specifically, whether the Bible is his inspired message.
And if someone does reach that conclusion, believing in a creator and trusting the Bible, what then? Does the source claim specific benefits?
It lists several potential benefits. First, finding real meaning in life, seeing the world not as an accident but a gift, and knowing the giver cares. It quotes acts about God providing rain and seasons.
Okay, meaning, what else?
Reliable guidance. The idea is the one who made us knows best how we should live to be truly happy and fulfilled. So the Bible offers wisdom on fairness, justice, relationships. It quotes Proverbs about understanding righteousness.
Makes sense. Guidance. What about those big questions we mentioned earlier?
Exactly. It claims finding knowledge of God through the Bible helps answer things like, why are we here? Why suffering? What happens when we die? Questions science doesn't tackle. Proverbs 2.5 is quoted here about finding the very knowledge of God.
Meaning, guidance, answers, anything else?
Hope. A solid hope for the future. Trusting Bible promises about peace, an end to suffering and death. This, the article argues, gives you strength and courage to face today's problems. It references Jeremiah 29.11 about God's thoughts of peace, not calamity.
And it includes personal stories here, too.
Yes, brief testimonials from people Cindy, Elise, Peter, Liz, Adrian, who share how believing in a creator apparently impacted their lives. Finding purpose, better relationships, coping with anxiety, seeing life as precious.
Real-world examples, according to the source.
Presented as such, yeah. To show the potential personal impact of the conclusion, the article invites you to consider.
Wow. Okay, we've really walked through the structure and key arguments of this Awake article.
Yeah.
From the universe's design.
To the complexity of life, the stated limits of science on origins.
And the source's case for the Bible aligning with science and offering deeper answers.
It covers a lot of ground. And throughout, as we noted, it maintains that stance. Here's the evidence we're presenting, now you decide.
It really puts the ball in the reader's or listener's court. It starts by saying your answer could matter more than you realize, and ends by showing how it claims that belief can change your daily life and outlook. So maybe the final thought to leave with everyone, drawing directly from this deep dive into this source, is this. Given the specific points raised here, the cosmic fine-tuning, the intricate design in life, the question science leaves open, the Bible's account, and the personal implications suggested, how might really grappling with this origin question affect your view of the world? What stands out most to you personally from the material presented in this source? Makes you think, doesn't it?